there at Carmel was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. Now she was intelligent and she was a beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite. Now while David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men, and he said to them, okay, hey, go to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. Now, I hear that you're shearing sheep, and it's that time of year. When your shepherds were with us in the desert, we did not mistreat them. In fact, the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your own servants, and they'll tell you. Therefore, Nabal, be favorable towards my men, since we come at a festival time. Please give your servants and your son, he called himself son, I see, as your son David, whatever you can find for them. And when David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name, and then they waited. So they're out in the desert, which, by the way, just before we go much farther, scroll down to verse 15, that same chapter. One of the servants is going to describe more precisely what David and his men did out in the desert. It says, yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing was missing. Night and day, they were a wall around us. The whole time we were herding our sheep near them. All right, so let's begin with this guy named Nabal. What do we know about him just from the text? What's it say?
He's bad.
He's what?
Bad.
Okay, he's bad. It's described as what? He's described as surly. Anybody, who uses the word surly anymore? What's that mean to you when someone says surly? Not surely, but surly. Anybody? Nobody uses that anymore, okay? Here's what surly means. He was cruel. He's a cruel guy. And the word mean here is the word ra in Hebrew, and it's a general term which just means the guy's a jerk. He's a cruel jerk. But he's not just a cruel jerk. What else is he? He's rich. I mean, he is wealthy. And of course he is, right? The jerks are always wealthy, right? Just picture in your mind some guy that's got a ton of money, ton of wealth. He's mean. He's cruel. What else does he have? A beautiful, intelligent wife. No, I really hate him, right? The only thing worse is if he was a Christian too. It's got everything, So we have this thing we have this guy Nabal who's got all the women, right? Beautiful women, a bunch of stuff out there, and he's got his flock is out in the desert where David and his crew are hanging out. Now, living in the desert is definitely not the Nabal lifestyle. David and his men are hungry, they're tired, they're living in caves. And yet they find it out of the kindness of their heart to help out these shepherds who are employees of Nabal, and they're shepherding these flocks. And these are not small flocks, these are huge flocks. This is a big deal. And David and his crew have been really playing security for these guys. We find out from verse 15 and 16 here that they didn't just watch out after the shepherds. They actually would camp around the flocks to make sure marauders and thieves wouldn't get in and steal the sheep. And they did that just kind of out of the kindness of his heart. The shepherds were there. They saw that they were, Nabal, of course, doesn't hire enough men to do the job. So David's kind of feeling sorry for these shepherds. He's like, yeah, all right, we'll help you out. And so it comes to the time of year, once a year, where they do this big festival where they shear the sheep. So the whole village works for Nabal. And they've all been working all year for the harvest, harvesting the wool, harvesting the goats. And so they all come together. Big festival, lots of people, lots of stuff. Everybody's laughing and it's just joyous music. And so David and his men are living in the desert. So he sends 10 guys. He says, hey, go down to Nabal, go down to the festival, and just see if Nabal can maybe kind of help us out here. I mean, we were helping him out. And I think Nabal knows this, because there's no way that they could be protected that whole season and Nabal not ask the question, boy, who's been watching out for you? Well, these guys out there named David and these guys. Oh, it's really interesting. So the guys show up, 10 show up, and they say, hey, David was just asking, and he starts off real kindly, right? He says, listen, it's been such an honor getting to know your shepherds. It's been great working here, and just wanting to help you out and all. So here's the thing, Nabal. Do you think maybe you can just, like, after the party's all said and done, if there's any leftovers, could you maybe, like, send it with my men so we can just have something to eat up here? And the men shared that, and it says they waited. Well, let's see what Nabal does here. Now let's make sure he is surly and he's mean, right? He's a cruel jerk. So that should give you a sense on how this is going to go down, right? Let's pick it up. Nabal answered David's servants. Who is this David you're talking about? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shears and give it to the men coming from who knows where? Here's what Nabal says. Let me translate this. He's like, who? David who? You know David. Yeah, I don't know David, and we don't have a contract, and, whatever it is, I don't even know. You could be runaway slaves for all I know. I don't even know who you are. And the last thing I'm going to do is take away from my shears and do, no. You get out of here, you cons. You're a bunch of cons. Well, so the men says in verse 12, David's men turned around and went back. And when they arrived, they reported every word. All those 10 men, they went back to David. And David's like, what? Where's the stuff? Oh, you should hear what Nabal said. And they told him every word. Well, listen to what happens. Verse 13. David said to his men, each of you, strap your sword on. So they did, and David strapped on his as well. Anybody remember what sword David's packing around at this point? Goliath's sword. It's like a 2x12 that's 8 foot long, right? Are you kidding me? So they did, and David strapped on his sword as well. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. If you scroll down in the text a bit farther, go all the way down to verse 21. This is what David's saying. It's been useless all my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness, so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David. Oh, this is bad. David's dropping it in the third person now. David's saying, this is what Mike would do. You don't treat Mike this way. You don't treat David this way. So God said, may God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him. David hears this, and David's like, what? Get on your swords. We're killing every single male. We're going down there. Nobody treats us this way. Nobody does this to us. This is unfair. The guys are like, really, David? I mean, just last chapter, you could have killed the king. You felt bad about cutting his robe, and here you are freaking out because you didn't get fish and chips or something? I mean, we're killing him. Can't take it anymore. So they're going down there, and they're going to fix this right now. No one treats me like this. Nobody. Well, word gets back to Abigail, verse 14. One of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, hey, just thought you might want to know, David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greetings, but instead he hurled insults at him. Yet these men, they were very good to us. I read this part, right? Yada, 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 verse 17. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can even talk to him. Even the servants are like, yeah, your husband, Nabal, that guy's a jerk. He's, B-I-L, this means he's worthless. That's what that means. They're wicked. He is worthless. So Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, loaded them on the donkeys. Then she told her servants, go on ahead, I'll follow you. But she did not tell her husband Nabal. Why? Because he's a cruel jerk. And Abigail knows it, and Abigail knows I got to clean out the pantry, and I got to cut this thing off at the pass. This is what she does. Says verse 20. As she came riding her donkey into the mountain ravine, there was David and his men descending towards her, and she met them. I already told you what David was already telling the guys. We're going to put a whooping on them. So look at verse 23. When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey, bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet, and she said, hey, pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please, pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He's just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. My husband's an idiot. That's what she says. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my lord sent. Here's what she says. She said, my husband's an idiot. I normally am the one that deals with this stuff, and I didn't know your guys showed up. So this is my fault. And now, my Lord, as surely as the Lord lives, surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my Lord be like Nabal. What she says is, listen, I'm going to be your servant here, and anybody that comes up against you is a fool. Anybody that does. And let this gift which your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord because, here it is, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. This would be a great spot in your Bible to underline the Lord's battles and then draw a little line to where you have a margin and ask this question: is this the Lord's battle? Because I can't tell you how many battles I've fought that looking back were not the Lord's. They were my battles. I was fighting my fight. It wasn't about what the Lord wanted. It was only about what I felt needed to be fought for. So this is what Abigail does. She says, you fight the Lord's battles, which is why you don't need to go down here and do this. She says, even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. And when the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience, listen to this, you will not have on your conscience, David, the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant. She lays herself out before him. He says, listen, I am stopping you from making a mistake. I could tell that you are ticked. But don't do this. Don't do something that's going to be, as she says, a staggering thing to your heart. You know, it reminded me of that scene in Star Wars. Remember when Anakin gets so upset about what happens to his wife, his love, that he goes in and kills all of the little Jedi, all the kids. In his rage, he just kills them. And from there on in, it's like something trips in him. Like he just gives way to the pain. He just gives way to all of this. And she says, don't let that happen to you. Don't be that guy. And so what happens is David responds. Take a look here, verse 32. David said to Abigail, praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord lives, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you. If you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive at daybreak. She didn't even know that. She didn't even know what was going to happen, but he says, yeah, we were about to slaughter y'all. So he says, then David accepted from her hand what she had brought him and said, go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request. I think that's key. I've heard you. I'm going to let that go. There's almost a sense here where David kind of, his whole shoulders, everything's so tight, and he just, you're right. Then, so let's listen to verse 36. When Abigail went to Nabal, who, by the way, has no idea what's coming down on him, right? He has absolutely no idea that there's a bad moon rising, right? And so, this is what happened. When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was no king. He was pretending to be one. Then in the morning when he was high in spirits and very drunk. What's that tell you Nabal's doing? Nabal is in the middle of a party. He is totally wasted out of his mind. So she told him nothing at all until daybreak. And then in the morning, when Nabal sobered up, his wife told him all these things. Nabal's like, hey, babes, I didn't see you last night. What was going on? Abigail's like, you want to know what's going on? Let me tell you what was going on. I had to go up here. I did this. Anyways, he so freaks out by this that take a look. His heart failed him, and he became like stone. The dude had a heart attack. He's like, what? 10 days later, the Lord finishes him off. The Lord's like, yeah, done. And David in verse 39. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, praise the Lord! Who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his heart. Look at that. He has kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his head. You know what he learned? I didn't need to force a solution. I just need to wait. This is going to play a big part a couple chapters from now when David is talking to one of his men about killing Saul, because this is going to come up a second time. And David's response is, it's almost, word for word connected to this praise right here in 39 and 40. So it says, then David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. Hey, she's free. All right. So his servants, the body is still warm. He's like, hey, you want to what? Yeah. So his servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, David has sent us to you to make you become his wife, or to take you to become his wife. And she bowed down with her face to the ground, said, I am your servant. I'm ready to serve you and wash the feet of my Lord's servants. And Abigail quickly got on a donkey and, attended by her 5 female servants, went with David, messengers, and became his wife. And the rest is pretty much history there. So they get married. He has another wife. And some of you may say, whatever happened to Michal all that time back? Well, Saul never really gave Michal to David. It was all just a ploy. So anyways, so here's the situation, right? Here's the situation of a guy who is under a tremendous amount of stress. None of it his own doing the very best he can. He's doing this right, and this right, and this right, and this right, and this is going wrong, and this is going wrong, and this is going wrong, and this is going wrong. And then this one jerk from Carmel doesn't give David a gift of sorts, doesn't repay him for his kindness, and it's almost as David took all of the stress and it just boiled down to Nabal. And he's going down to take it out on him. Does anybody want to give a story of when you took out your stress on somebody or something and there was more going on? Like, I got to tell you something. Sometime I'm going to need to make an amends to the person on the other end of the DirecTV line. There are times I've been on the phone and I'm sure I think they live in a country, not this one, but I just tell you that, man, there are days, right? There are days where it seems like this God just seems to be rubbing, and I can't control Saul. I can't control this. I can't control that. I can't control this. And then some yahoo isn't going to just at least show me some kindness. That's it. I'm going down there. This is the one thing. But something's going to go right, and hell or high water, it's coming today. All right. David is tired. He's burdened, and he's weary. Chris made reference to it earlier, Matthew 11:28. There's such a key word there that Jesus says to the crowd. He says, "Come to me." Don't go to the phone. Don't go to Instagram, tweets, Facebook. Don't go down to that office. Don't go crawl over the counter. Come to me. You who are burdened and weary. Normally we think of burdensome and being weary as like working really hard, like a hard day's work, or we're tired. But I gotta tell you something. Some of the most burdensome, wearisome people, and I put myself in the lot many times, are people that are carrying around resentment and anger and hostility, and they've just pushed it down, and they've pushed it down, and they've pushed it down. And some of the folks I find are some of the people that attend every week. They pray, they read their Bibles, they put money in these baskets, they serve in ministries, and it seems like they do all of this and nobody cares. Nothing seems to go right. It always falls apart. Nobody follows through. People hurt me, they leave me, they reject me, and it's just on the inside. And one day, some quirky little jerk across the counter says something, and off with their heads. And the truth is, we are just so tired and broken. And it's not supposed to be like that, right? You do all the right stuff, and it's not supposed to go like that. And you realize God is just rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. Mike, when are you going to come to me? David had pride. How dare he? How dare he do that? I'm David. I don't deserve that. How many of you have done something nice for somebody, went out of your way to help somebody, and then when you needed a favor from them, they're like, "Oh, sorry, can't help you." And there's a part of you that's like, "Ugh." The least they can do. Oh, there it is. Let me tell you something about cruel jerks. Okay? Cruel jerks do cruel and jerky things. When you're nice and loving to a cruel jerk, do you know what they're going to do to you? Say it. Cruel and jerky things. Deal with jerks and you get jerked around. Well, it shouldn't be like that. You cannot change the nature of a jerk. Well, why are they such a jerk? I don't know. Well, they shouldn't be a jerk. You're probably right. But you know what? That's what they are. Because let me tell you something. As much as Nabal knew who David was, I can't help but think that David knew who Nabal was. Because those servants, how did they describe him? He's worthless. You don't think those shepherds are saying that? Who do you work for? I work for Nabal. He's a jerk. Oh, really? Well, we're helping. They say, well, Mike, are you saying it's my fault? I'm just saying this, okay? And this is going to be something that's going to be really, really hard to hear, okay? Y'all ready for this? So just sit back and just, this is hard. Your pain is your responsibility to deal with, and nobody else's. You know, they say, whoa, I didn't. They caused me the pain. Oh, I'm sure they did. But once it's in your wheelhouse, guess whose it is to deal with? Yours. You can't blame somebody else for resentment, bitterness, and rage. That's yours to own. Well, what am I supposed to do? Here it is, the second painful thing that you're not going to want to hear this morning, but this is why the offerings are free. All right? Free to give. And that's this. The pain is in the resistance. The more you resist what God is doing, the more painful your life will be. Remember when Jesus said we need to take up our cross and follow him? We need to die to self. Those who pursue their life will lose it, but those who don't want to lose their life will or those who lose their life will save it. Remember that? There is a sense of dying to self. Dying to self is this thing where I give up control over my life and over the things that are most valuable to me. I give them to God. And when I give up control of those things, then they're God's to do what he wants to do with them. Okay? Everyone turn to the person next to you and say, that's hard. Just turn to a person right now. Let them know what they're thinking. That's hard. That is hard. That is so hard. But as much control as I have over my life, over my will, over my future, over my loved ones, over my stuff, as much control as I have will be to the degree as how much pain and suffering you're going to have as God works in their life as well as yours. But when I begin to say, you know what, this is your house. These are your kids. This is your body. This is your car. This is your washing machine. This is your whatevers, okay? Once I begin to do that is the moment that I can say, you know what? It's not mine to worry about. The only things that I worry about and struggle with are the things that I believe I own. Think about it. You know? I know Chris, he's a great friend of mine. You know, he's got a tractor, for example, okay? He can tell me how horrible the tractor may be running and how it's going to fall apart and the engine's going to blow up. And he hasn't told me that, but I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. But here's the thing. He tells me that, man, I'll pray for you. I don't stress about that. Anybody want to know why? Take a guess. Not my tractor. Oh, that's a bummer. Not my tractor. If it was my tractor, I'd be praying a lot more, I guess. I don't know. Did you understand what I'm saying? The stuff I own is the stuff that is painful because I don't have control over it. The pride, justice, and fairness. I don't have any control over fairness in this world. How many of you have come to realize life's not fair? Right? I mean, we've heard that, right? But doggone it, if we're not going to try to make it fair, at least in our little world, right? Life's not fair out there, but in this house, it's fair. Right? No, it doesn't work like that. Life doesn't work like that. And David's learning that, yeah, you know what? This thing in the desert isn't fair. Yeah, it's not fair he lost his friend. Yeah, it's a bummer that Samuel just passed away when David needs him the most. Yeah, it's not fair that he's got men that don't understand him. It's not fair about any of this. And the thing is that once we accept the fact, you know what? This is not my life. This is not my stuff. This is not my calling. This is not my home. This is not my stuff. God, this is yours. And if I were you, God, I'd be totally freaked out. But thank God, I don't have to worry about it. And let me tell you what happens when we do this. Go to Luke chapter 6. I gave you two hard statements. I'm going to give you one of the hardest scriptures in all the Bible. Luke chapter 6, verse 27. But to you who are listening, if you're not listening, don't worry about it. But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. You see, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those to whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners expecting to be repaid in full. But not you. You love your enemies. Do good to them. Lend to them without expecting to get anything back. And when you do that, your reward will be great. Because listen to this. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High. How many of you would love to give up being an adult? How many of you come to realize adulthood has become the curse of our life? I get stuff, I have stuff, I control stuff. That's what adults get to do. And everything you've ever wanted has actually been the very thing that's made you tired and weary. And Jesus says, listen, you give up being an adult. The greatest reward you'll ever get on this earth is you get to be a child of the Most High. Who, by the way, he goes on, is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. So, be merciful, just as your heavenly Father is merciful. Treat others the way you'd want to be treated, like a kid. My friends, the Christian life is not about growing. It's not about perfection by any means. It's about giving up the idea that you'll ever be perfect. It's about giving up the control and all that you have in your life. Listen, all of us have stories of unmet expectations. All of us have stories of being wounded and hurt by people that were supposed to love us and care for us. All of us have stories of what it means to be rejected and abandoned by people that said they would always be there. And in that, we grasp onto things. And in grabbing onto all this stuff, we've come to realize it's not working. And we're raging on the inside. The greatest gift that God can give you and give me is to let it go. And trust that His will is good, pleasing, and perfect, because it is. What happened to Nabal at the end of that story? God had a plan. And He has a plan for you. He has a plan for each one of us. I know it's scary right now. I know you're tired. And it seems like it's just everything is not working. If I could give you any encouragement today, wait on the Lord and know that whatever's going to come out of this, it's going to be better than had you try to force a solution in your anger on your own. So Father, this morning, thank you for loving us like this. Thank you for caring for us like this. Lord, this is a hard lesson because it touches the deepest parts of our life. It touches the parts where we pray to you and we're begging that a circumstance would change. It's the parts of our life where it really attends to our mental chewing gum. It really, God, These kinds of lessons are ones that challenge our faith. So God, we come to you as children saying, yes, take it. Take this from me, God. It's yours. Do with it what you want. I trust you. That's our prayer this morning, God. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. So let's stand as we wrap up the morning. And Joe's in the back. He'd love to pray with you. I'll be up here as well. But let's wrap up in a final song this morning.